Rehash. For those who aren't aware of my life, I'll try to summarize it all, but it's not something that's easily put into a short paragraph or two. Growing up with my mother was worse than hell. If you've ever wondered what it would be like if your worst enemy went back in time to raise you, you'd understand my life. At some point around 9 to 10 I began to realize how alone I was and how exhausting my life would turn out to be. I kept hoping this time she'd finally just continue wailing on me, hoping she'd just never stop beating me and finish the job. Either that, or I'd be so close to death she'd be forced to take me to the hospital where they would question her and I'd somehow be saved. It seemed like nobody ever cared enough to look deeper. Dislocated my shoulder with a cast iron pipe, beating me every night until I ate things I was slightly allergic to and then beating me more for throwing it up. Lit my Christmas presents I got then having to be held back by her boyfriend at the time because she was holding a knife to my neck telling me for the millionth time that I was worth less than my father and nobody else would care if she did it. I could fill pages with all the things she did to me. I remember when she really started digging in and telling me I was worthless nearly every day. I was 13 and it was the first time I started contemplating suicide, though I was always too weak to follow through. My mother tried to kill me 3 or 4 times if you count a half-assed poisoning. I say half-assed only because I vaguely remember the details, but it involved her forcing me to drink something with bleach in it. It's kind of funny in a sick way because I didn't even remember that until now, and that's not as bad as all the things I've put a lot of effort into not remembering. I just have shitty memory, so I guess it helps. I don't think I've actually went longer than a few weeks without getting beaten bloody over something trivial like not washing dishes fast enough or walking away too hard after just getting beat up by her. Years of physical and psychological attacks. Did I call the cops? Of course I did. Can you imagine how hard it was to watch my mother smile and lie to the cops, telling them I was exaggerating, then having to watch them get into their cars and drive away knowing I had to go back inside? In the beginning, I had hoped things would change. Towards my teen years, I started drinking and stopped caring, and now here I am after all of it somehow still alive. My stepdad used to tell me years after his divorce with my mother that he only stayed with her because he was afraid she'd kill me one day. He's lucky he never saw how much worse it got when he wasn't there to take the hits for me anymore. It would break his heart. He was also the one who told me about my mother's being sexually abused while growing up in a different country, which helped me to gain some perspective in my teens. Not that it made a difference by then. It didn't matter to me because each and every day she had a choice every time and she'd choose to hurt me every time. Maybe I'm overstating things considering she didn't actually kill me even though she has come close so many times. Maybe that means deep down she secretly cared about me or something. I don't know. I don't think about it. She did go out of her way to buy me new electronics often, but she'd end up using those as leverage against me and invading my privacy constantly, so it ultimately wasn't that much of anything. After everything and all the times she kicked me out from 13 to 17 years old, I was always on edge. She told me when I was 18 while I was staying with my aunt that if I went to college, I'd always have a place to live. I don't know why I believed her. I had went to go stay with my aunt temporarily for 4 to 6 months after my mother kicked me out of the house at 17, but my mother would always stop by and buy groceries for me or leave me cash. She was unnaturally kind to me while I was there. By this point, she wasn't hitting me anymore. Not that she could, as I'd have snapped and absolutely wrecked her shit at that age, but I strongly dislike hurting people in any form, so the point is moot, and was more so prone to just verbal attacks, but since I was never really around her anymore, life seemed to get easier. My mother had learned more than enough ways to fuck with me without touching me. It seemed like she hated me more than I hated myself at times. My aunt couldn't have me stay with her anymore as she really liked her privacy. I had already been there for a while, and I was an emotionally damaged and rebellious teenager she didn't have time to help. So, I went back to my mother's house for the last time and started attending community college full-time. I didn't really have any desire or passion. I was just an empty husk going through the motions, but I was still trying my best to keep living, even when I didn't feel the will, in the hopes that one day I'd feel something different for once. My mother, of course, decided to go back to her old habits. Things like dumping all the trash with dirty diapers and old food or dirty dishes filled with water on my bed when I was out if I forgot to do them, and sometimes just because she was in a mood. Locking me out in the snow for hours because I didn't respond to a text or something even if I had class in a few hours. I wasn't even allowed to have keys. She'd pretend not to hear me when I rang the doorbell or knocked for hours. She'd also tell my younger sister to ignore it. I'd eventually end up having to sleep on the steps outside or at a friend's house and get punished for doing it even though I was 18 because it was her house and her rules. It was always nonstop. I had no real direction and I honestly had no plans to exist past 25 years old. Despite literally all of that and then some, I was doing well in school, community college, with a 3.6-ish GPA. I finally left my mother's house for the last time a few days before finals week. I came home from drinking with friends and was met with my mother glaring at me when I rang the bell at 9 p.m. yelling when I'd move out as soon as I walked in. She followed me to my little closet of a bedroom where I tried to close the door behind me and she half ripped the door off the hinges. I just sat there on my bed and stared at her silently as she kept cursing and screaming questions at me. My mother then walks away, and as I'm in the kitchen getting juice, I hear her on the phone calling the cops on me, claiming she was scared I'd murder her or my younger siblings. I just didn't have the energy to deal. This was 3 days before I failed all of my finals because I couldn't even make it. I was dealing with too much. So, I went and grabbed whatever I had and left 15 minutes later. My mother and I only ever really communicated via email after, though it was very rarely and it was very businesslike. I'd tell her what I needed and she'd either tell me to fuck off or give it to me. It was hard to maintain consistency in my life then. I was at rock bottom all the time. I didn't care about anything. I drank every day, hung out with the worst kind of people who brought out the worst in me. I bounced between cheap rooms and couches. It was early 2016 when I discovered photography, and it completely changed the direction of my life. I didn't hang out with anyone or bother trying to maintain all the pointless relationships. I just dove headfirst into it. I was able to put the things I didn't understand about myself into perspective. For the first time in my life, I felt something. Not like a feeling per se, just like this sense of possibility. For the first time, I was seriously wondering just what I could be capable of. I had something to look forward to. I felt like if I pushed myself as hard as possible, I'd be good at something and I'd be a good person. And so I isolated myself from nearly everyone I knew and spent every single day learning or practicing or being frustrated that I wasn't getting results. Even though I was drinking heavily, I always held a job and kept doing photo shoots and kept practicing like mad. I eventually got my first apartment and was functional for a year. Did I have my shit together? Hell no, but I was figuring my shit out. Cue one of the worst days of my life. Me getting robbed while I was blacked out drunk for 2 months' rent and camera gear by a friend, which lead to me losing my apartment and job, followed by an email by my mother asking how I'd been. We ended up talking on the phone, and it was civil for like 3 minutes before I mentioned how hard things have really been for me. She was bragging about some new expensive speaker system she bought, and I like a dumbass asked her for money, about $100. I told her if I could give my landlord anything, he'd be reasonable and give me time to get more cash together and I'd be fine. LOL, that obviously did not go well at all. It all escalates to her literally logging and then telling me it was my own fault for being homeless. She also completely denied ever abusing me when I stated I was in the situation because of her. I hung up on her. My thoughts were all over the place and I felt this intense frustration more so than anger. Within a few moments my head cleared and I had decided something as I was sitting in my bedroom 5 or so minutes after the call. I decided that was going to completely ruin my mother's fucking life no matter what. Revenge. And so I did. I called Child Protective Services on her and informed them of my history of abuse at her hands. I informed them about the dozens upon dozens of old photos I have of myself all bloody and bruised up. I previously compiled as much evidence as possible in my teens, though never did anything with it until that point. That sparked a visit which led to an emergency removal of my 3 younger siblings when they caught my mother punishing my little sister coincidentally when they happened to do a visit. My mother was also arrested but released hours later. I reached out to the job she got years ago with the fake resume she made me write for her and made them aware of her falsehoods. Because of her field, it was promptly looked into and she was fired as well as blacklisted. She lost nearly $80K plus salary. I then deleted every email in all of the email accounts I made for her because she never changed the passwords. Afterwards, I deleted the email accounts themselves. Within a few weeks, things were definitely going downhill for her. My youngest sister's dad was engaged to my mother and is now trying to file for sole custody of my little sister who's in Child Protective Services custody. I'm sure he wasn't happy finding out what his baby daughter has in store if my mother was given free rein. She's missed her court appointments, and I know she hasn't been able to pay her mortgage since last year, as I've heard she had to ask one of her friends for money. Her life had become a creamy, messy shit symphony, and I was the fecal-splattered conductor. It was all going to shit. She went radio silent for months and had a warrant after missing another court date. This was all fall, winter of last year that she was off the grid, so I went on with my life. Early 2019, I get a random call from her and find out she went to her home country months ago after everything went to shit. How she was allowed on a plane, I have no clue. So cue another geyser of bullshit spewing from my mother's mouth. She's telling me I need to tell Child Protective Services she's a good mom and that she's never abused them or me. It's unbelievable. So I cut her off and I shut her up. I was a little buzzed when she had called and had always mentally prepared for this moment. I started slowly telling her in graphic detail about all the gross shit I used to do to her food because fuck it. I told her how I used piss in the pitcher of the Lipton iced tea she used to force me to make for her and then not allow me to have. I told her how I'd secretly sabotage her utensils with my butt cheeks before serving her food. She was quiet at first, but then began cursing me out, though it didn't bother me. I'm on a roll and I wasn't listening. Her words didn't matter to me anymore. She's blaming me for her life turning out so terribly while fully unaware of how true that statement is in terms of the situation she was currently in. She shuts up long enough for me to get one more word in before hanging up and blocking her number. I thought that was the end of it. I expected my last post to be my final update, but as I've said before, my life is a shit symphony. The official update. My aunt and I recently reconnected about 2 months ago. Prior to last month, I haven't seen her in years. We met up and had a long conversation about life and everything, and then she admitted that she talks to my mother nearly every day. She had mentioned all the things happening to my mother, but didn't know it was me who started this all. She actually felt really bad for my mother, but my aunt was always a really caring person, so I understand, I guess. I told her I was very uncomfortable with the thought of her talking about me to my mother and asked her not to. My aunt did it anyways. After meeting up with my aunt, I learned through her that my mother was finally coming back to America. She was arriving at the airport in 1 week. The problem was my aunt told her that I was going with her so the three of us could all talk without telling me. I didn't know what the feeling of betrayal really felt like until my aunt told me that. To be honest, as wrong as it sounds, I'd rather my mother just think I died or something our phone call. But my aunt kept insisting that I had to give my mother another chance and I had to learn to be open-minded, and that though she wasn't there all the times my mom did horrible shit to me, she loved us both and wanted us to get along. Like I'm supposed to just get along with someone who has tried to murder me? Like my mother has choked me awake for school. If you don't know what it's like to forcefully wake up not being able to breathe and seeing your own mother standing over you at 5 a.m. angrily and tightly gripping your throat, count yourself lucky. But, as I said at the beginning of this post, I've already resolved myself to being a bad person, and so I lied to one of the only people who was kind to me, and I promised my aunt I'd try to have a heart-to-heart with my mom and her and talk out the nearly 20 years of abuse. Obviously, that was not happening. When we got off the phone, I called the detectives who gave me their months back in case I heard from my mother. I asked them a few leading questions about what would happen if so-and-so were discovered, and then I made my plan. I wasn't sure if my mother would make it past customs. How is she able to travel to a different country with a warrant? I didn't know. But if she did, I'd call the police in the bathroom and wait for them to arrive while I sat with my mother. Cue my mother making it past fucking customs because she's my mother. She's a horrible person, but she's good at what she does, which is being horrible. I digress. My mother calls my aunt when she's getting off the planes, and my aunt says she's going to meet her. I told my aunt I'd wait for them in the little Starbucks and then we'd all drive somewhere else. My aunt agreed and went off. I called the detective and told him that my mother was standing a few feet away from me and if they could meet me at our destination we were going to. They told me that was unnecessary and that they'd have officers closer to me come and apprehend her at the airport instead. And so I waited and waited, and then I finally saw them arriving both at the same time. The 3 to 4 officers who had convened in those few passing minutes and actively searching around the food court I sat close to. My mother and my aunt walking down the gate towards me. I felt this overwhelming weight in my chest just kind of settling down deeper and deeper into my gut the closer they got and the more the officers searched. What if they stopped looking when my mother arrived? What if my mother somehow got away with this shit again? Countless thoughts, but I just bit them back. I've grown very talented at silencing whatever my inner turmoil of the day happened to be. But my mother and my aunt were animatedly talking as they made their way to where I was sitting. Before they had a chance to say anything, I quickly jumped up and said, "I ordered some teas, let me go see if they're ready," which was the first thing I could think of as they were sitting, but it worked and I dashed off past the cash register to the Starbucks and to the outer part of the food court. Looking back, saying I had to go grab some tea probably wasn't the best thing to say, but I digress. I made it a few feet out the door and half jogged over to the officers who were still looking around the food court area. From where they were, they wouldn't have seen us sitting. I walked over and asked them if they had gotten a call about a woman who had a warrant or something. I mentioned that the detectives said officers in or near the airport would arrest her. They said they did, and I told them it was my mother. I told them her first name, and they verified her last name. I told them she was sitting right in the Starbucks waiting for jail, and one of the cops chuckled. Seemed a bit surprised and judgy that I was pointing them right to my mom. I told them I'd go make sure she didn't leave, and they followed behind by like 10 to 15 paces. I half jogged back inside and up to the little table where they were sitting. My mother had that half scowl she always wore whenever she looked up at me when I popped up out of nowhere, and my aunt began asking me where the drinks were before I cut her off and looked dead at my mother and her scowling face, which had quickly changed into confusion when I had finished my sentence. "Mom, I know we don't get along, but I wanted to let you know it's all my fault." Cue my mother starting to ask me with this kind of soft motherly voice, "What do you mean it's your fault? Why do you T-dash?" But of course I cut her off because there's nothing she hates more than being cut off, and I finally have the power in this situation. "Look, bitch. I want you to know exactly whose fault it is, and whose piss you fucking drank when you're sitting in jail wondering why the world did you so wrong." She sputtered something and slapped the fucking shit out of me. My aunt's jaw dropped. People are watching. The cops saw it happen as well as only a few seconds had passed from when I walked in. Into handcuffs she goes. Now she's showing her true colors. Cursing and saying all kinds of things you couldn't imagine a mom saying to her kid. Telling me she'd fucking kill me and so on, etc. I calmly walked behind them as long as I could until they took her to some room and held her until the detective arrived. I wasn't there that long though, as the lack of thrill of it all kind of got to me, and I went home to break a 2-month sober streak. I was there long enough for my aunt to tell me she was disappointed in me, and that she doesn't know if she can forgive me for doing something so spiteful and disgusting to her sister. To be fair, I did it completely out of spite, so she isn't wrong. I've already acknowledged I'm not a good person for what I did. Come to find out, my mother was using my aunt's passport to leave and come back to the country multiple times since she left. That's why they never caught her. Now my aunt has some explaining to do, but I wish she didn't have to get caught up in all of this. She has always been kind to me and doesn't deserve it. My mother is facing up to 10 years just for using my aunt's passport alone, and a slew of other charges, including one for child endangerment. Her husband left her. Her kids were taken from her. Her friends have seemingly distanced themselves from her from what I know. After 19 years of abuse, I finally get my revenge, and none of the charges have anything to do with me, which is interesting. Did it feel good? No, I felt nothing. Just the rise and fall of the situation, but nothing really concrete. I expected to feel something. Not even satisfaction or happiness, but something. Either way, the only thing for me to do is continue to work towards becoming the person I want to be. She told me constantly that I was worthless and that I'm nothing. I've told myself the same consistently as well in the past. I've decided I'm going to become one of the greatest photographers of my time, and I'm going to push myself as hard as possible to succeed so that anyone else who has ever suffered how I have now have no reason to doubt themselves or their ability to be great one day. As for me right now, I currently live in a homeless shelter. I decided to go to one 6 months ago after realizing all the drinking and inconsistency was making it hard for me to move forward. I wasn't saving money and was couch hopping from friend's house to friend's house. A few weeks ago, I got a voucher from the government, and sometime in the next 2 months, I can find a one-bedroom or a studio apartment. I've been aggressively saving my small checks. I've been practicing and working on building better habits and just being a better photographer. I don't make much right now, and I know many people will say it's a stupid dream, but I know if I put all of effort into making this work, I can not only be a self-sustaining photographer, but more than that. My situation is embarrassing and it's hard, but I know I won't be here longer than another few months. It's not some dream, it's a plan. I'll also be going back to school in the fall and pursuing photography. As for my siblings, that situation is still a bit dicey, and I don't think I'll give an update about that, but they're all doing very well. As far as my mother is concerned, as horrible as she was towards me, the only part of me that even thinks about her on rare occasions hopes she isn't having a horrible time. I don't like knowing people are hurting. My mother physically and psychologically abused me for most of my life. After she laughed at me about being homeless, I got her fired, divorced, and months later put in jail where she's facing 10 years minimum. Also, my life is trash, but I'm trying my best. For everyone roasting my aunt, please stop roasting my aunt. She has always been supportive of me and what I do in my photography and has believed in me from day one. Maybe I'll take it over to r/relationships or something. I need advice, but I don't plan on putting much thought into that relationship right now. Also, for everyone asking in literally all my posts, yes, my username is on purpose. It relates to my first ever bit of revenge I was able to get on my mother. I'm sure you already know what that is. Also, thank you to everyone for being supportive and offering me advice about places to get therapy in my inbox, but as I've said in my prior posts, I don't think therapy will help. I don't see how talking about my feelings or lack thereof is going to change anything. I'd rather just post another mini autobiography on the internet if that's cool with y'all. Thanks. Lastly, thank you to all the kind humans and all your kind words of hope and encouragement. It means a lot to have you guys believe in me and see value in my photography. I don't really know how to sell prints to everyone asking, but I appreciate the love regardless. Your words help me reaffirm my belief that I can get better and be great one day. I plan on it. Hope you stick around for the journey. If the mods will murder me for putting my photography page, but it's comment. I remember your original story and your update. One thing I have noticed consistently is that you fall down, but you pick yourself up again. You're going to have what feels like a lot of ups and downs that won't feel dramatic or huge, but are necessary. You will get back on your feet. You will get your life on the path that you want it. All you have to do, sounds simple, but I know it's not, is keep putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes we all gotta swim upstream. You got this. You can PM me if you ever need to just hear some positive words or encouragement. You can post in Reddit if you want to. But I got this. OP reply. Thank you for the words. I keep reminding myself this whenever things get difficult. I'm not really good at talking to people privately about my feelings, lol, hence the long Reddit post unloading my feelings, but I appreciate the offer, friend. Comment. Your mom is gone now, and she can't hurt anyone physically anymore. You did a good thing. Your aunt seems to be enabling her and defends her despite all of the horrible things she has done. She is also not innocent. Thank you for your update. I have been following this for a while now. You're working very hard to improve your life, and that's great. I wish you the best. Comment. I apologize for this armchair philosophy. Your story is incredibly moving, so this is the only way I could think to help. I believe there is a certain level of badness a person can hold inside them before reaching a tipping point. Some people end up on the wrong path due to their upbringing, their experiences, what have you, but are able to change their ways. Methods may vary, but it's a lot of work, a lot of pain, and a lot of introspection. Others, they've crossed over that point. Whatever's happened to them in their lives, or however their brains are wired, they're incapable of overcoming what we would call the evil inside them. They may be unable, they may be unwilling, but the result is the same. They become monsters, but they still deserve our sympathy, which I think you know. I would guess that something in your mother's life went horribly, horribly wrong, and that's why she felt the need to lash out on you and your siblings. I suspect you have an idea what, but I won't go there. The problem is that whatever turned her into a monster she tried to pass down to you. Evil begets evil. But rather than turn it against others, you turned in towards yourself, which in a way is noble. You don't want to hurt anyone else, but you're also depriving the world of the beautiful person you are. You fell on your sword to protect the rest of the world, which I suspect is why you felt nothing. You weren't motivated by the beautiful revenge you dreamt of for all those years. You did what was right, which usually feels like shit. Now, hard facts. Your mother is a horrendous human being and deserves every bad thing that happens to her. Her lack of any kind of remorse dooms her. And you're confusing your aunt's love of family with her sense of morality. It's readily apparent how much you love her, and how you blame yourself for any misfortunes that have befallen her. But there's a legal term for what she did: aiding and abetting. Not only did she know what was going on and fail to act, she actively promoted your mother's behavior by letting her use her passport. She knew what was going on was wrong, but instead of reporting it, she helped your mother escape from the whole situation. I'm sorry, but love does not conquer all. She's just as culpable as your mother. But you're something fucking special, man. You sacrificed yourself to end a perpetual cycle of abuse, saving countless people. I know it rings hollow, but take pride in what you did. I'm also in the unfortunate boat re-treatment. Every therapist I've seen has fed me endless platitudes, and AA is a stack of horse shit. You may find smart recovery more your speed. It involves accepting your own fuck-ups as opposed to blaming a higher power, and you can do it on your own. Most importantly, it places logic above faith, which is a pretty big deal. Just take care of yourself. Someday this will all be a distant memory you can reflect upon from your rocking chair, on your porch, behind your white picket fence, and you'll be satisfied. I have no evidence to prove this, but I have faith that it'll happen. Opie replied, damn, this was just a lot to take in. I enjoyed reading your analysis. It helps me to understand things better when someone else breaks it down for me from an outside perspective. What you said about my aunt really got to me, and I've been thinking more and more about it. It's hard to be prideful in my situation. I'm still trying to work on my self-confidence. As far as treatment is concerned, I'll definitely look into SMART. I've tried going cold turkey and find myself impulsively buying alcohol once every 2 weeks. I don't even enjoy it anymore. It just makes me feel disgusting. But like once the idea pops into my head, it's happening. It's hard to fight with years of programmed indifference towards my own physical and mental health. Comment. I'm so happy you found something to be passionate about even amid all the bad things that happen. Bravo to you for going to college for photography. I would love to see some of your work. Sometimes going through bad times like you did gives a person's work passion that you would not find in a person's work without going through a lot of stuff like that. Passion is often born through sorrow. If you have any work you want to share with us, we would love to see it. Opie reply, believe me, I honestly didn't expect to live this long. I had no drive or passion for anything. It all felt like one long-ass day that never ended no matter how much I tried to sleep or drink it away. Everything felt pointless and I was indifferent towards everything. I wanted to feel something for once other than this constant nothingness with little dashes of disappointment in myself for not being able to fix what was wrong with me. I realize now I didn't have the strength of will, an actual plan, and the resolve necessary to push myself way past my comfort zone. Photography really forced me to look at the world around me from as many perspectives as possible. Not just that, but it was the first thing I found that still mattered a week or two later. If I got this far with photography being a drunken mess, I'm excited to see what I'm capable of if I applied myself and got an official education in it with a clear head and more resources. I'm trying to make more decisions that will make future me proud, as I know my future self is watching me through my memories and judging me. So instead of listening to all the why nots my brain is coming up with as to why I can't go to school yet or do this, I just decided to ignore it. I'm willing to fail over and over again to get what I want. Failure can't be worse than what I already dealt with. I actually just created my first website a few weeks ago, so any insight is appreciated. I also added a download section full of free Lightroom presets and Photoshop actions for any new photics looking to learn. I appreciate your kind words, by the way. Comment. Been following your story for almost 6 months. This is heartbreakingly sad. Your portraits are beautiful and I can see that sadness and darkness in you that you hide in your photography. You are such a strong person. I don't know how you do it. You have me along with many other people rooting for you. Also, please remember this. A bad person doesn't actively try to get better and inspire people. That's not what bad people do. You got dealt a really shitty hand and you survived. I believe in you, OP. OP reply. Not sure what to say other thank you and I appreciate your support. I'm not good at taking compliments at all, lol. Comment. Evil thrives when good people do nothing. Your aunt may not be in the same league as your mum, but she stayed out of the way and sometimes even cleared her path. Witness how she lent your mum her passport. An illegal act, by the way, and growing up, did nothing to stop her sister from abusing you. She only offered you a place to stay out of courtesy. I know it's hard to hear, but your aunt is not a good person. She knew exactly what the cause of your suffering was and was in a position to address it at its root. But she didn't. You are well shot of the both of them. Meanwhile, it's good that you have a plan and that you're trying to get your life back together. Don't worry about embarrassment, shame, or losing face. You can't afford that at the moment. Just take whatever time you need and whatever help is given and get back on your feet. When you succeed, and you will if you keep at it, pay it forward to the next person who needs it. All the best, OP. OP reply. I think I may have painted my aunt in a bad light. She's not a bad person. I appreciate your insight and your words. You're right that I can't afford to bother myself thinking about being embarrassed about my position and just focus all my time and effort on doing my best. Thank you, stranger. Comment. I want you to know that you did the right thing. Perhaps you will never feel that way, but your siblings, those who were still under her torment, will. Maybe not now, but one day. You may have saved their lives. At the very least, you saved them from walking down a similar path. On another note, have you ever considered reading? Good, emotional fiction. Stuff that you can disappear into, escape reality, and live for something worth living for. For romance, adventure, whatever you please. Nothing feels better than forgetting your own reality. OP reply, I actually read a lot of books. It's a great way for me to prepare my disappointment when the film adaptation comes out. Like Max Brooks' World War Z or The Darkest Minds. Comment. I didn't know your history before reading this just now. I feel like you were much kinder to your mother than she deserved. I think to even use the word mother is a far stretch. Your pictures are stunning. You have talent and passion. As a mother, my heart breaks for you. You didn't get the mother you deserved, and that's not fair. Please know you are special and worthy of love. Happiness can be found in the darkest of times. If one only remembers to turn on the light. Your photos are that light. OP reply, I don't know. I did this with full knowledge it would ruin my mother's life. I'm not the good guy here, but thank you for being so kind. I also really appreciate your Dumbledore quote and your words about my photos. I'll keep doing my best. Comment. OP, I've been following your story from the beginning. I'm glad you are free. You may not have felt anything at the time of that shitbag's arrest, but you will. You are going to go on to great things. You've got the grit and determination to be a great photographer. One day I will be buying your fancy photo prints. Let me know when you get there. I'd be honored to buy the first one. Also, you should write a book about your experiences. OP reply, I was going to say the thought of having all my depressing life details in a book out in the world is just weird, but then realized I posted this on Reddit and like 200 people read this already, lol Sue. OP reply, also thank you very much for all your positivity. I have the memory of a spoon, but whenever I do decide to sell some fancy photo prints, I'll send you a telegram. Please leave your story in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to get new update. Thank you.